first.
This is Piers Morgan Tonight. Good evening. We begin, as we do every night, with the big story. Tonight, it's a very real threat of a war between Iran and Israel, one that Washington is desperately trying to avoid. No matter who wins the election in November, the president will have to face the reality that this country's closest ally in the Middle East may be on the verge of attacking the Islamic Republic. The consequences could be catastrophic, but is it too late to stop? Joining me now, an exclusive interview is Israel's top military official, Defense Minister and former Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, and a friend of this show. Thank you for coming back, sir. How are you?
Thank you. Very good.
Good to see you. Now, you're here because tomorrow you're going to go to Washington to see Defense Secretary Leon Panetta on funding for a missile defense system for Israel. This puts the whole atmosphere about Israel's security to the central political fore right now. And the key issue, it seems, is Iran. Everyone says at the moment it's a tale of two Baraks, Barack Obama and Ehud Barak, that he believes that you are the key figure in the Israeli administration, the one who is keenest on taking military action against Iran. What do you say to that?
I say we have a different political system. We have a government. We don't have, I don't believe that I'm the key person. There is a Prime Minister Netanyahu. There is a government that should take decisions collectively. And I'm not sure whether we are yet on this decision. We are now facing, I don't like the use of words like catastrophe that you have mentioned. It's not about catastrophe. It's about a real challenge to the whole world, not just to Israel. I think that nuclear Iran will change the whole landscape in the Middle East. We have to do something to block it from happening, be it these sanctions or the negotiations or else. And I think that now we are in the negotiations. And we have to see. IAEA had talked with them in Vienna. They seem just to maneuver. Probably they will meet again before the 23rd, before Baghdad. And then there is Baghdad. And we talked to Baroness Ashton a few days ago in Jerusalem.
I mean, these are high-level talks in Baghdad. They're critical talks in many ways. Leading countries meeting there to discuss what to do next about Iran. Are you of the belief that the reason you have to get stuck into Iran now rather than too late is because if you leave it too late, you see what happens in North Korea, you see what happens in Pakistan, that countries that are unstable can develop nuclear weapons if people don't take action soon enough. You would point, I guess, Israel to Iraq and Syria as cases where you intervened, where you struck, and you were successful in stopping those programs continuing. Do you see Iran as being in those categories, that you have to get in now because if you leave it and they can protect themselves from airstrikes or whatever, it becomes too late?
No, please, I cannot improve your description. It was so close to perfect. But I think that the real challenge now is these negotiations. And what should be done about the negotiations first? We strongly believe and we rely upon the United States and the other members of the P5+1 and expect them to set the bar at a place where it becomes clear that at least once agreed, and however long it takes to reach there, it will block Iran from turning military nuclear. It means that there is a need to stop enriching uranium to 20% or even to 3.5%, to take all the enriched uranium out of the country. You can allow them to play with some negligible amount that will never be suffice for even one single weapon. And basically, there is a need to destroy this installation in near Qom. So if all these elements are set, and the IAEA has the tightest protocol 3.1, it's called a kind of inspection. That's it. But if the world community will set the threshold in a way that even if fully accepted, not to mention if partially accepted by the Iranians, but even if fully accepted, it still allows them to keep moving toward nuclear military program. That's
concern is
ridiculous. It's right, an exercise in delusion.
But your main concern is that the Iranians may, in this impasse, the time that goes on, they may start to move the uranium enriching process and factories or whatever into areas, mountainous areas perhaps, where they cannot be destroyed. Is that your primary concern?
Our primary concern is that Iran will not be blocked when the time is still there to block them. And what they are doing, they try to reach such a level of redundancy through digging it into hills, through spreading it on many sites, through accumulating a lot of enriched uranium for probably half a dozen weapons or whatever. It's still not fully enriched, but it will come inevitably because the Iranians basically are trying to reach nuclear military capability and defy the whole world. Otherwise, there was no need for all these sanctions and diplomatic steps.
Right. President Obama clearly would prefer not to see Israel take any action before the election. So there is a time sensitivity here. He would see that as politically dangerous for his presidency, and you would be aware of that. How much does that factor into your military planning on Israel's behalf, that the President of the United States has an election coming in November?
You know, first of all, we are trying to avoid of letting it slip into anything that carries a certain relationship to internal politics, either here or in Israel. But we basically share the same rhetoric. We say loud and clear, the Americans say the same, the President says the same. A nuclear military Iran is unacceptable. We are determined to prevent them from turning nuclear, and that no option except for containment, no option should be removed off the table in order to achieve these objectives. So basically we are on the same page. The rest of it is about there are differences. We try to discuss them fairly and honestly, and when we say no option should be removed off the table, and when the Americans say, we assume, and I genuinely assume that the President means it, and I can assure you that we mean it.
You're a military man, though, and you know that there is always an optimum time to take military action in these cases. Are you prepared to act completely unilaterally if you have to?
I don't want to respond to this question, but I think that the overall situation is clear. We say, the leaders of the world saying, including the American president, no option should be removed off the table, and we basically mean it. And we have said many times that we always listen to America, especially to America. They are our best allies, the most trusted and trustworthy allies of us. But at the same time, we cannot afford delegating the responsibility for the future security of Israel even into the hands of our best and most trusted and trustworthy allies.
You've always been keen to say that the President of the United States and America are friends of Israel, but friends can come in many qualities. Who do you think...
High-quality friends.
Okay, but who would be a higher quality friend come November? President Obama or potentially President Mitt Romney, do you think?
Oh, I can't answer. You know, I don't think that there is a shortage of energy in this race in America. I just noticed here Joe Biden speaking.
Yeah.
I couldn't hear him. The volume was muted, but
you didn't need to have it. It was unbelievable.
The new energy kind of into this race. I don't think that we have to contribute to it in any way.
You're not concerned about the outcome either way. You think that whoever wins would still be a resolute friend of Israel?
I think it's improper for an Israeli political leader to express publicly any kind of judgment or even to make remarks. It doesn't mean that we just respect the American process and we rely upon the American people to make your judgment. It's up to the American people, and our tradition is, to the extent I can remember backward, American presidents all along the years, from both sides of the political aisle, be it in their first term or second term, were always friendly toward Israel because it reflects something much deeper that goes through the American society. We're sharing the same values. When we look at the Arab Spring that turns now green not in theological terms, not in kind of environment terms, it's extremely disturbing, and Israel is the only outpost of democracy, of stability, of the Western way of life in the region.
How concerned are you about the situation in Syria, given that it's going on, but world attention, as it often does, has started to move into other areas, but the situation remains unchanged there? It's still very dangerous and very unstable.
I'm quite frustrated for the slowness of his collapse. I believe that he is doomed anyhow. I believe that there is a need to raise our voices, both for moral reasons and practical reasons, much more kind of loudly, and to make sure that every possible step is taken by world community, by NATO, by the United States, by the Russians. Turkey could have a special role in it.
But it seems to people,
accelerate the whole thing.
It seems to people that there's a different way of dealing with Syria than there was to Libya, for example, and that the main reason is that the Russians and the Chinese are more concerned about Syria. But from a humanitarian point of view, why should that come into it? Shouldn't the international community now be driving as hard against Syria as they did in the Libyan situation?
I think that they have to push harder. I don't want to make comparison because the Russians were quite against their judgment dragged into the Libyan story. And here in Syria, they see the only successful outpost of them in the Middle East. They invested political capital and financial resources for 2 generations almost now in this family and group. I think that the way should be found, while pushing harder to change the situation in Syria, preferably through the Yemenite example, namely to let the Assad and his group go out and try to keep, not to repeat the mistakes in Iraq, not to dismantle the party, the intelligence, the armed forces, to find a way to keep a role for Russia, a leading role around the table of nations, because if you try to do it in a way that will deprive them from their only asset, darling, in the Middle East, they will resist it, and it could be extremely influential. But to mention Iran, it will be a major blow to Iran when Assad falls, and they are now supporting him very actively. It will be a weakening blow to the Hezbollah and probably Islamic Jihad. So basically, it's something, you know, sometimes people contemplate, probably better the devil we know. I don't believe in it. It's better to reach a conclusion there and try to keep civil society, the present organs of power, basically in place without the elite, which was kind of extremely intimate and close to Assad.
Ehud Barak, always fascinating to see you. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.